אבא אהוב, מזל טוב ליום הולדתך ה-56. אני בטוח שאתה יודע עד כמה אני אוהב אותך. כל יום אני מודה לאלוהים על הזמן היקר הזה שנתן לי איתך. אמנם הזמנים קשים, אבל אנחנו ביחד, חזקים ואוהבים. בסופו של דבר, אהבה ומשפחה הם שני הדברים החשובים ביותר בחיים של כל אדם. ולך, ברוך השם, יש בשפע משניהם. אני רוצה לומר לך עד כמה אני גאה בך, על הכוח הנפשי שאתה מדגים ועל האהבה שאתה נותן. אז המתנה שלי אליך היום היא להזכיר לך את הרגעים המתוקים והמשמחים בחיים. כי בסופו של דבר, אלו הרגעים שנזכור. אלו תמונות החיים שישארו חרוטים בזיכרוננו. באהבה, בנך רביב. So Dad, my gift to you today is to remind you of the sweet and happy moments in life. Because when it's all said and done, these are the moments that we will remember. These are the pictures that will be engraved in our minds. I love you beyond words, Dad. Your son, Raviv.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, happy birthday. Happy birthday to you.
Elimelech Tawfiq, also known as Roland Netzach, was born in Tehran on February 24th, 1947. At the tender age of 15, Roland moved to Israel by himself. Arriving in Israel's Ben Gurion airport, he had nowhere to go and no one to speak to. Fortunately for him, he was taken to a kibbutz, where he spent most of his time working with cows and learning Hebrew in the kibbutz's ulpan. While at the ulpan, Roland was taught the basic, most important words of Hebrew, as we can see on the board, such as chamor, donkey, nevela, dead body, cholera, a type of disease common to Israel, efes, 0, Leazazel, go to hell, tinofet, dirt, tembel, dumbass, idiot, idiot. With this rich vocabulary, Roland was well on his way to become a true, full-fledged Israeli. In 1964, at the tender age of 16 and a half, a full year and a half before his 18th birthday, Roland lied about his age and joined the Israeli paratroopers. Following basic training, Roland volunteered for officers' school, where he was trained to become a paratrooper special forces commander. As a commanding officer, one of his first missions, while still under the age of 19, was to cross the Israeli northern border and penetrate deep into Lebanese territory to search and destroy a stronghold of the Hezbollah terrorist group. The small elite force was helicoptered meters away from the border and penetrated Lebanon by foot. A few kilometers into the mission, the Israeli force was ambushed. Following a bloody battle where Roland lost several of his friends, the Israeli force retreated back into Israel. Roland carried one of his soldiers for over 6 kilometers until they reached the safety of the waiting evacuation helicopter. Laying his friend in the helicopter, Roland realized that he himself was severely injured. He was placed on a stretcher and flown to the hospital. Just before the helicopter took off, Roland remembers seeing Ariel Sharon, then the commanding officer of Israel's northern front, shouting orders to evacuate the wounded. When he woke up again 3 weeks later, he was told that he had fallen into a 3-week coma. The doctor explained to Roland that a mortar exploded only a few meters from him and left metal fragments in his entire body. Both of his feet shattered during that mortar attack, and by carrying his comrade for over 6 kilometers with 2 broken feet, he only aggravated his injury. Roland woke up alone in the hospital, covered from head to toe in a full body cast. No family member was available to visit him, and he spent the next 9 months alone in the hospital in a full body cast. On the 10th month, the body cast was removed, and Roland was on his way to a massive rehabilitation center. His body required weaning off the morphine that was administered to him for over 9 months. His muscles required rebuilding, and his body required a complete overhaul. But Roland remained strong. He fought through the morphine addiction and trained every day to regain his strength. At the end of his rehabilitation, the army offered him an honorable discharge with full benefits, but Roland refused. He demanded to be reassigned to his unit immediately. On the faithful morning of June 5th, 1967, King Hussein of Jordan ordered his Jordanian legions to attack Israel's eastern border. The Six-Day War had officially begun. Battalion Jerusalem 16 of the Israeli Defense Forces held back the Jordanians on the south side of the city. At the same time, it conquered Gizrat Armon HaNatziv, Mutzav HaMapon, and the connecting road from Jerusalem to Bethlehem. Infantry Battalion 10 of the Israeli Defense Forces was operating in the north side of the city. It conquered and controlled the road connecting Jerusalem to Ramallah. During this time, Roland belonged to the Paratroopers Special Forces Battalion 15 of the Israeli Defense Forces. His battalion was initially sent to fight the Egyptians on Israel's southern border. However, due to heavy resistance in Jerusalem, this paratrooper battalion was diverted to Jerusalem and was honored with the task of being the first Jewish fighting force in Jerusalem in over 2,000 years of exile from the Holy City. On the morning of June 7th, the paratroopers conquered Jerusalem, and Mota Gur made the famous call over the military radio, Har HaBayit B'Yadenu, the Kotel is in our hands. Learning of these momentous events in school as a young child growing up in Israel, I felt tremendous pride that my father played an integral part in this historical battle. Not many children can say this to their fathers, but I can. Thank you, Dad. Thank you for sacrificing your well-being to make the world a better place for us. Following the war, Roland started living as a normal Israeli. He worked odd jobs such as construction, factory work, and driving. During one of his off days, which happened to be in the middle of the week, he went to the beach for some sun and waves. At the beach, he met a beautiful young lady with blue eyes. This woman was Ayala Fessel. He asked her what she was doing there during the week, and she told him that she was ditching school. The young couple started dating, and Roland used to pick up Ayala in his Vespa, which had a boat connected to it. They used to go all over the country with this contraption, until one time a car hit the Vespa while Roland was on it. He flew from the motorcycle and landed on a fat old woman. The poor woman broke his fall, and he didn't have a scratch on him, but the old woman had to be hospitalized. Following this incident, Roland gave up driving a motorcycle. The young couple courted each other for over 2 years, and then decided to marry on May 5th, 1969. Roland continued to work very hard. In fact, he worked so hard that he almost forgot the day of his wedding. He was supposed to pick up Ayala from the hairdresser at 5 p.m. and did not show up until 5:45. The hairdressing salon had to close, and Ayala was standing outside with her wedding gown, full makeup, hair, and flowers, wondering if her groom got cold feet and left her. But Roland showed up 45 minutes late. They got into the car and drove off to be married.
ורול היקר, יום הולדת שמח. אני מקווה ובטוחה שאתה יודע שאתה תמיד אהבת חיי, ואני יותר מאשר אוהבת אותך, ומקווה שאתה תמיד תזכור אותי ככה, כי מאז שהיינו ילדים, מגיל 16, אנחנו יחד, והיו לנו עליות, היו ירידות, אבל בסופו של דבר תמיד אהבנו אותך, תמיד אהבתי אותך ותמיד אוהב אותך. ואני מאוד 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 גאה בכל מה שעשית בשבילנו, ואני יודעת כמה אתה בן אדם חזק. אנחנו כולנו חזקים איתך, אוהבים אותך, דואגים לך, ומקווים שאתה יודע את זה, ושתשמח היום ביום הולדת שלך במסיבת ההפתעה שעשינו לך. אני מקווה שזה יהיה מאוד 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 משמח, כי זה מאוד משמח ומרגש אותנו. באהבה, אשתך איילה.
Yom Kippur, October 6, 1973. The holiest day in the Jewish calendar. Egypt and Syria opened a coordinated surprise attack against Israel. The equivalent of the total forces of NATO in Europe were mobilized on Israel's borders. On the Golan Heights, approximately 180 Israeli tanks faced an onslaught of 1,400 Syrian tanks. Along the Suez Canal, fewer than 500 Israeli defenders, Roland among them, were attacked by 80,000 Egyptians. At least 9 Arab states, including 4 non-Middle Eastern nations, actively aided the Egyptian-Syrian war effort. Thrown onto the defensive during the first 2 days of fighting, Israel mobilized its reserves and eventually repulsed the invaders and carried the war deep into Syria and Egypt. The Arab states were swiftly resupplied by sea and air from the Soviet Union, which rejected U.S. efforts to work towards an immediate ceasefire. As a result, the United States blatantly began its own airlift to Israel. 2 weeks later, Egypt was saved from a disastrous defeat by Israel. The UN Security Council, which had failed to act while the tide was in the Arabs' favor, decided to come to Egypt's help. Roland's paratrooper battalion was fighting the Egyptians on Israel's southern border. Unlike the Six-Day War, this time Roland was married, and unlike the Six-Day War, this time Roland was away from home for over 7 months. Ayala missed Roland terribly, and every few weeks that he had a chance to call, she would tell him how much she misses him. During these difficult times, when a soldier died in battle, the government would send Chevre Kadisha to the soldier's family to announce of his death. Chevre Kadisha were ultra-Orthodox Jews who volunteered their time to help in the war effort. 6.5 months into the war, Ayala heard a knock on her door. When she opened the door, she saw a Hasidic Jew standing in front of her. She fainted on the spot. The poor man started calling for help, and the neighbors came out. They asked him, "What happened?" And he said, "I don't know. I came by to collect donations, and as soon as she saw me, she fainted." Finally, they were able to wake her up and get her back on her feet. I don't think she donated that day. After this event, Ayala decided that she must see Roland, come hell or high water. One day, after 7 months of not seeing her husband, and while still at war, Ayala decided to hitchhike all the way across Israel, again I stress, during wartime, and find Roland in the front of the fighting. Luckily, by the time she got close to the fighting, one of Roland's friends saw her standing at the side of the road hitchhiking and stopped to pick her up in a military jeep. He was on his way to the front and took her with him. When they finally arrived deep into the Sinai by the Suez Canal, Ayala finally saw her husband and ran to him. Being a true Middle Eastern man, he hugged and kissed her and then proceeded to yell at her, "What the hell are you doing here in the middle of the war? Are you crazy? My men have not seen a woman in over 7 months. They're going to rape you." Of course, Roland was just kidding about the rape, but he commanded one of his soldiers to drive Ayala straight home. Ah, the power of love. On August 22nd, 1976, after 8 difficult years of trying, Ayala and Roland had their firstborn, Raviv.
I took my love and I took it down. I climbed a mountain and I turned around, and I saw my reflection in the snow-covered hills, where the landslide brought me down.
5 years later, on September 1st, 1981, the Netzach family received the most precious gift in the world, a little baby girl named Shelly. Our family was complete.
ואבא יקר, הייתי צעירה, לא הבנתי כמה אתה אוהב אותי. לפעמים אפילו הייתי מתעצבנת שאתה כל כך שומר עליי. היום אני מבינה כמה אתה אוהב אותי, ואתה שומר עליי בגלל שאתה כל כך אוהב אותי. לפעמים יותר מה שאתה אוהב את עצמך. בתור מבוגרת, אני מאוד מעריכה את כל מה שעשית בשבילי. שהקרבת אפילו דברים בחיים כדי שיהיה לי חיים מאושרים. אני מאוד אוהבת אותך, ואני מקווה שאתה גאה בי כמו שאני גאה בך. מזל טוב אבא, עד 120, אני אוהבת אותך. מישל. לדוד אלי היקר שלי, אני מאחלת לך בריאות ומזל טוב ליום הולדתך. כולי תקווה שנוכל לחגוג עוד הרבה ימי הולדת שלך כאיש בריא וחסון כמו שאני מכירה אותך מאז ומתמיד. אני רוצה שתדע שאני אוהבת אותך גם כדוד וגם כאבא. אני זוכרת ימים שעלינו ארצה ואתה היית בשבילנו, בשבילי ובשביל שתי האחיות שלי, כחבר, כאבא, כתומך, ככתף שהיה אפשר לבכות אליו. אני אוהבת אותך מכל הלב ומאחלת לך יום הולדת שמח ובריאות ממני ומכל המשפחה. תהיה לנו בריא רק. משפחת נצח טופיק, אני מאוד מתגעגעת עליכם, אני מאוד מאוד אוהבת אתכם. מיד שנפרדתי מכם אני תמיד איתכם, חושבת עליכם. אחי היקר, שמעתי שיש לך יום הולדת שמח, זה מאוד משמח אותי שיש לכם סיבה, ואנחנו גם משתתפים כאילו, אפילו מרחוק, מאוד מאוד שמחים. אני מאוד שמחה שהייתי איתכם, אפילו זמן קצר, דיברנו, אתה זוכר, עמדנו בדיחות, צחקנו, ומאוד מאוד מאוד אני אוהבת אתכם, אתם יודעים את זה, לא צריך להגיד. ואחי היקר, אני מקווה שעד 120, בעזרת השם, אם השנה לא היה לי זכות להשתתף,